All right. Welcome, everyone. Got a lot of attendees today, so we're going to let them come in from the lobby here. Thank you all for joining. We'll get started in just a minute. Oh, we got a great audience today. Awesome. Still got some people coming in. Let's get started in about 10 seconds. People time to join. Oh, look at that audience. Very cool. Oh, I'm excited, Sarah. This is going to be good. Okay. All right, well, let's jump into it. Welcome, everyone, to our 2026 Small Business Creative Outlook webinar. My name is Kyle Porter. I'm your host here at ACT-insured, and today I'm joined by Sarah Miller, our program manager, and one of the key architects of the research that we're about to present to you. Sarah, do you want to say a quick hello?
Thanks, Kyle. I'm really excited to be here. I'm Sarah Miller, Program Manager at Veracity, the parent company of ACT. We put a lot of work into this year's report, and I am ready to dig in.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you for joining us. So today we're going to walk through our 2026 Small Business Creative Outlook report. We put out about a month ago. I'm going to drop it into the chat for you guys if you guys haven't taken a look at it. It's chock full of statistics and tips and what we're seeing in the industry, what consumers are doing, what revenue is looking like, where it's coming from, and then, critically for this audience, what's kind of the latest insurance trends and risks that's happening within your space. We are going to do a live Q&A at the end of this, but feel free to drop your questions into that Q&A button at any point, and we might even jump in during the presentation. And just as a reminder that none of this should be considered legal or true insurance advice, please reach out to your insurance. I mean, we have Sarah, the insurance guru here, but reach out to an insurance professional with specific claims questions or coverage questions as everything's kind of different. So with that, let's dive into it. So I guess let's start at the kind of the top of what this report was. So this report, we surveyed more than 500 ACT-insured businesses, so people operating in your space, and more than 600 consumers. So this isn't just stories that we're making up. This is what we're hearing from people that's happening in your guys' industry. So the big picture, let's look at what's going on in the overall creative economy right now. What we saw in our report is that the market is stable, we're calling it, active and evolving. From when we looked at consumers and asked them what they were thinking of this space, what we found is demand is not really an issue. And I think Sarah will dive into that a little bit, but demand remains strong kind of across the board from consumers up in various ways. On the flip side of that, we did see that there are some cost pressures and things happening from the operator standpoint, and we'll dig through that. So I guess give us what 2025, if you would, Sarah. What did 2025 look like for most creators?
Sure. In summary, it was a year of mixed performance, but the story is actually more positive than a lot of people might expect. About 44% of the businesses we surveyed reported growth, either slight or significant increases in sales, and then another 28% stayed about the same. So roughly 70% of creative businesses were stable or grew last year. That said, about 28% declined, and there were a lot of struggles, specifically on the supply side of the business. And that tracks with what we heard from a lot of creators on the ground, and particularly sellers who relied heavily on a single channel, or potentially like they just selected a few key events, tend to struggle more because just one hiccup represented a huge impact on their season. So that's something we'll touch on again in a little bit.
Yeah, I thought that number was really interesting when I was reviewing it as well, that in a very positive light, 70%, we're saying, I think it was 30% increased slightly, 13% of you guys grew significantly. So huge kudos to you. And then about 27% stayed the same. So that's really 70% stable and strong growth within the industry. So I hope that that provides some sort of optimism as you look at the year ahead. And now we're already, what, 5 months into the year. And I'll be curious that you should drop some thoughts into the Q&A to let us know how this year's going. But 2025 really felt like a year of, comparatively the year before it was a little bit down. This year felt 2025 felt very stable and optimistic, and hopefully 26. Looking at 2026, I think one of the big headlines we got from the report that we wanted to share is that in-person events, obviously following COVID, was a very difficult time across the board for multiple industries. This one, is no different. But this one, or this last year when we did this survey, that we found that in-person events remains absolutely critical for the success of independent creatives. So I know, the whole world's going online, and we're hearing that from our insurees as well, that they've got some great channels within their own websites. There's new tools on social media like TikTok Shop and things like that. Obviously, Etsy's a major one. But that in-person event remains kind of the biggest way that people are seeing growth. Now, we don't discourage using those various ones, and we'll tell you why as we researched what consumers were looking for. But I think as we look at 2026, making sure that your event calendar is full, whether you're in a stable singular location or traveling, that those kind of are a major way to connect with audiences, engage them, and ultimately uh, take or make sales. So I'd be curious, if anyone wants to throw their thoughts of how it's going, and I'll share your answers in the Q&A of how 2026 is going. But from 2025, that's what we were hearing from an overall standpoint. So we started kind of, as I mentioned, we entered or surveyed around 600 consumers who identified that they do purchase from independent crafters, etc. So I guess, Sarah, I'd love to throw this one at you. What are consumers, what are they actually doing right now? What is it? Are they still showing up? Are they still interested in the space? What did our survey find?
Sure. Yep. And consumer behavior was honestly a bright spot in the findings for this report. Um, Basically, most of our consumers prefer, so 65% prefer in-person events as their top purchasing channel, not
Yeah.
Etsy, not Instagram, in person at a market or fair. And nearly half are attending multiple events throughout the year. And that number is growing year over year. So
Yeah.
not only are consumers showing up, they're showing up more. And 71% actually said that they attend specifically to see and feel product quality firsthand. I think more and more consumers are losing faith in some of these online only channels, even through channels like Etsy. They'll, there's you see a lot of instances where someone orders something online and what they show up is what they have delivered to them is absolutely comical. And even on Etsy, like a product photo simply can't replicate a real life experience, and consumers more and more are valuing authenticity and handmade high quality goods.
That's awesome. No, and to share some of further data that I'm not sure we included the full picture in the report. Only 5% of people, again, they had to qualify for the survey by saying that they bought from an independent artist, craftsman, or tradesman at least once in the last year. Only 5% said that they only purchase one item per year. As we just said, more than half said a few times per year, quarterly, more than 24%, monthly 17%. So you've got people kind of really looking for these products. And what I can tell you is, in looking at all of this, they are buying. That demand is not only holding steady, but it seems like it's going up and dramatically. About two-thirds of consumers are purchasing at the same rate that they were before, and that 30% are saying they're buying more often. That's a really, really healthy picture. Looking at 2026, it seems like these types of products are really drawing the consumers in. They're wanting to find more. And to Sarah's point, what we found, and I saw that stat earlier too, and I thought that was interesting that they're wanting to see and feel it, and they want the unique items, and that you're just not going to get that. Temu came in, and sure, they can sell it for a few cents, but we all know nobody wants to order from that, right? They want a good quality product that they know that somebody's hard work went into. The categories that led the charge, this was interesting for us in our review. Home decor is the number one at 64%. So obviously that means a lot of paintings, things like that. But I think as you're looking at building out your catalog of what you're going to be working on this year, home decor consumers are extremely interested in the home decor category. We actually separated that one out by original art, and prints made up another 40%. Candles, jewelry, personalized items round out the top five. So, those can kind of fit into, oh, sorry, that was 60%. But those can kind of fit into the overall home decor, but it's things that people want to see and feel and make their space their own. So really, as you're working on things. So here's the important nuance on pricing that we're seeing, kind of across. We all know that the world's more expensive now, and especially last year, it was just starting, and it's affordability matters. And so what we asked consumers is to kind of range what they felt comfortable in spending. And the most popular price range was 25 to 50 items or $50 per item. I know that doesn't sound like a lot for a lot of you who have higher priced items and more niche and specialty items. But maybe adding something to your catalog that fits into that, such as a smaller piece or a lithograph or something like that that fits into that. More than 70% of consumers said they're willing to pay more for higher quality, but really want to look at that 20 to $50 range as feeling the most comfortable. And then, as we kind of said, that look and feel, 67% said uniqueness and originality do justify a higher price. So I know a lot of artists and crafters are working on limited runs. And we were doing our research. They said limited runs, then pointing out that this is limited, unique item, short run does kind of often justify that higher price. So our message to the sellers is don't race to the bottom, diversify your catalog to make sure that you're hitting kind of those groups of you got to have a 25 to 50. But here, let me pull up that data. More than 18% were willing to spend 100 to 200, and over 10% were willing to spend 200 plus. So it's certainly not, you have to have the cheapest thing, but affordability is really, really important in this time, paired with that quality and originality that demand a premium. So I guess looking at the report, what, Sarah, what did we find is actually driving people to these events in the first place? We talked about this quality and whatnot. Is that really what it is? What did we find from our survey?
Well, that's definitely a big piece of it. And really there's two things that really dominated in the report. The first is the desire to find unique products. Not necessarily going after what's mass produced or, like the top 100 list on some of these large online sellers, and the ability to see and feel the quality firsthand. And then the second biggest driver is wanting to support local and small businesses. I think more and more people are really wanting unique, locally sourced and made products that are supporting other like business owners in their community. And over 68% of consumers said they attend events specifically to support local and small businesses. They're not just buying something. More and more consumers are looking at, their purchases really being a value statement. And that's really meaningful for this community. And basically, like we constantly hear this from the creators that we've worked with who've built sustainable businesses, is the value of an in-person event isn't always just like captured in the weekend sales. A lot of people going to these events are really looking to meet the person that they're buying from, understand the story behind it. And I think that's important context when kind of planning out your event season and how you're going to host your booth at those events.
Yeah, and I know we keep driving home this event thing, which I think all of you kind of understand. I know we would love to dream of moving to a fully online world, but it seems like events will continue to be. And so what we did is we asked our policyholders really like, where are you making the money today? And it totally aligned with what the consumers were doing as they wanted to go to events and where did the money come from. And so in looking at this, I think one of the most striking data points in the review is we asked our policyholders what percentage of their revenue comes from in-person versus online. And it was 359 over 56. I did the math. It's 65% of respondents said that in-person sales make up 75 to 100% of their total income. I mean, 75 to 100%. I mean, talk about the importance of events. And by some comparison, only about 23% or 23 people total, excuse me, not percent, 23 people total said the same about online sales. So, we again, where we can think that there's an online shift where everybody's kind of going online, it really is, it's going and meeting the people where they are. We did another ACT webinar, which I'd love for anyone on here to go watch, where we brought in an operator, give some tips and tricks. And they said, I mean, part of their business is telling the story of the idea of where the art came from and the inception and how it's grown. And all of that makes up such an important part of the sales process that you just can't really convey online. And I think that that was really shown in this, 75 to 100%. So very event-based business still. I will talk about growth strategies. Online does remain a major component to this, social media, things like that. But really, it's for a majority of independent creative businesses, their whole business lives and dies and happens at events, and that's just important to know. But there's still a place for online. So I guess what did we find? What do we find about the online stuff, Sarah?
Yeah, I think overall right now is online isn't replacing events, but it's definitely gaining ground. So it's something to keep an eye on. And that's actually a healthy sign for the industry. On the consumer side, 44% said they've purchased handmade products online, whether it's Etsy directly from a maker's website, through social media shops. And on the business side, like you mentioned, some creators, a small subset of creators, say they plan to expand their business online presence in 2026, and I think that's probably a smart move, not just from expanding into new channels for the sake of doing that. It's not a replacement channel; it's a follow-on channel. Again, a lot of consumers in this space are really looking to develop not just like it goes beyond brand loyalty. They want to develop a relationship with the people that are crafting their unique and high value goods. And so it really creates an avenue to make it more convenient for them to make repeat purchases or to refer friends and family who might come to their house, notice a home good or a piece of decor that they really like, and then direct them to a maker's online store. So it's really just a multiplier in terms of adding to your growth strategy.
I love that concept of a follow-on channel, that it's a complement, right? And I think that what we found is operators are looking this as a hybrid. It's not all in one or the other. It's events are still going to drive that revenue and customer discovery, but the online channels offer that consistency and side income when maybe you could chase them with a good loyalty program or a follow-up. I know in our other webinar we spoke with, it was you always get a takeaway, their phone number, something that you can follow up with someone. That's a follow-on channel, right? But where you met them in person, follow up. But the strongest businesses that we surveyed here are building both legs under them. Looking at the numbers, the creators are planning to expand, that want to expand this year, top two, as we just said, local events and online stores. Local events, 31% want to expand into more events, 23% want to put their emphasis on their online stores this year. But it really, again, it's a diversification to try and generate those revenues and those new customers. So creators we see doing this, they're not trying to be everywhere all at once. They pick the channels that fit their products, their customers, and honestly, their bandwidth, their ability. You can't be in multiple places at once in events, so you can only do so much. But that's where that social and online presence comes in. So when talking about that, those consumers those businesses that are looking to grow, we talked about online. Can we dive into that a little bit more? What did our research, Sarah, from your analysis look like in terms of like smart growth in 2026? What are the operators saying?
Yep. So, I mean, the good news is the demand is there. So we've established that consumers are showing up, they're spending, they're open to paying more for quality. So the opportunity is real. Smart growth in this year is really about making sure you're positioned to capture it. And that starts with how you think about events. We talked earlier about like the risk of over relying on a handful of shows, like you said, one bad weather weekend and your whole season takes a hit. So there's real value in building a diversified event calendar. But the way that you evaluate those events matters too. It's not just about what you sold. Every event is a chance to learn what inventory resonated, how your booth layout is working, how you're talking about your work and your pricing. Those are things that compound over time. And it's also an opportunity to learn from other artists and crafters at these shows. So we're seeing that the smartest growth come from creators who treat each event as a marketing and a learning opportunity, obviously, in addition to the chance to generate revenue. And they tend to be the ones that are the most sustainable and survive some of the economic turbulence that we've been seeing.
Yeah, I was looking at the data and I'm excited to share. I've got it pulled up here. in terms of where they're looking to grow, specifically online, well, or their business in general. But a few things stood out. The first thing we kind of noticed is that operators are adding channels intentionally, not reactively. Like I'm sure you guys have all been, well, why aren't you on TikTok or why aren't you on this? And you, again, you've got to be more strategic, what we found with where you want to put your time, because these channels take time, right? You can't just jump onto TikTok because everyone says to do it, thinking if it fits your product, does it fit your consumer? Like at the end of the day, is your consumer on Facebook? Are they on Etsy? Are they on TikTok? I mean, obviously TikTok trends a little bit, younger, things like that. But kind of picking those channels that you think at the end of the day your audience is on and then staying consistent with it. I think this is the biggest thing they say in marketing is what is it? You have to hear or see a message 7 times to take action. Well, if you're not consistent in posting and putting out your new work and getting that message out there, you're trying to put it all over the doing too many things at once. What we heard in the report in our survey was I've been really successful, whether it's TikTok or going through it here. TikTok was one of the biggest ones, but Instagram and Etsy still remain a massive one for people. They kind of stuck with it and stayed consistent. So whether it's showing up at the same markets year after year, posting the same platforms, the consistency really builds recognition and trust in this category, which is extremely important, and people know how to find you when they go to look for you. And then interestingly, which I kind of thought price fluctuations given costs would be a major one in this, and that's actually not, according to our report, what came out. Pricing discipline, not cutting prices to compete with mass-produced goods, was a major thing that we heard in our responses about kind of showing your own quality, right? You don't just offer random sales or let somebody. We heard that in our other webinar as well, is people come to these and they think they're going to haggle and they're going to talk you down because, well, I could get a print on Amazon for 20 bucks. That's not what they're buying, right? They're buying quality, they're buying originality, which is really what they're there for in the first place, which we talked about. So really maintain that price discipline to know what you're worth. I thought that was extremely important. That we found it not only in the survey of those who felt that their businesses were growing or looking to grow, as well as that last survey we talked about. And we hear this reinforced over and over from artists describing every event, even slower ones, as a marketing investment. You might not have had the best sales weekends, but thousands of people walk by your booth, hopefully. Some took your card, follow you on Instagram. Always have that out. The follows on Instagram, loyalty programs, we talked about those as well. Because that planting that seed might not pay off today, but it pays off down the road. So being consistent, and they don't want to see that they bought something and you priced it down the next day, kind of sticking that in this space specifically, sticking to your price and being consistent and having discipline within your pricing shows the value and lets it ride. So I really encourage people, as much as you want to make that sale, because you're spending money to get there, I more than get it. Excuse me, standing strong in what your value is and what your product's value is really, really important. I'd love to know if anybody has thoughts on that in the Q&A. If you guys are seeing that, if you're doing that, please drop it in there. I'd love to share some of the thoughts on it. But Sarah, knowing all of that, I'd be curious, from looking at all the report, and you've done this for quite some time as well, do you have any like practical advice for people expanding their business this year, this season?
Yeah, I mean, you already covered a lot, so I have some to add to what you already said. I think of growth and expansion in terms of like operating different levers. You can look at additional products to add to your inventory. You can, of course, look at adding additional events, or if you're not already using online channels, you could look at expanding there too. But oftentimes, I think business owners, particularly small business owners who are trying to do it all, they often overlook you may already have a gold mine in your existing contact list, your emails, and it's really underutilized. So these people already know your work. They already like what you do. I think they're also a wealth of, if you're not sure where and how to expand in product lines, you can ask. A lot of people don't even think to do that. And so even if it's a small list, to let them know what you're up to, what you're thinking about, you can get some real gold there and come up with some ideas on specifically what's the smartest play to expand your business this year. And also look at what's already working for you, and are there opportunities for you to do more of that so it doesn't require as much of a pivot in maybe some of the other areas of your business.
That's really smart. And something I love about this operating in this sector specifically is while you all kind of you are competition at the end of the day, you guys don't treat each other as such. And I absolutely love that it's a sense of community because, so many products are unique and they again, you've got that unique niche target audience that we asked our participants in the survey, where do you like connecting with other audiences? And in our other webinar, they really pointed out to do that, to ask questions, to find friends within the industry to talk about, because you become a sounding board and you can learn from one another. So, 37% recommended joining a Facebook or online group, local meetup and events, 28%. Actually work, the ACT newsletter, we're here for you guys and want to be able to connect you. We're actually trying to figure out ways we can bring you all together to be able, but we highly encourage, and other operators share that they highly encourage to get with one another, share that, prices are going up and everybody's cheap and nobody will buy. But if you go watch that other one, they shared some valuable tips. It's like, oh, I never thought of how to arrange my booth in this way, to get someone to step into it. I thought that was really practical. So I absolutely lean on the community. Um, so all of that said, a lot of people looking to grow. Again, kind of not putting all your eggs in the digital basket, but absolutely an important part. We did want to also look at the challenges, right? What were the challenges you guys had last year, and how are we looking at them this year? So as we talked, we touched on this kind of throughout that costs have gone up, but let's call it out. When we asked creators to name their biggest challenge in 2026, the overwhelming theme was the economy. Rising costs, inflations, tariffs, uncertainty. This came through loud and clear in 2025, and I think that I speak for everyone on this call and listening that has not stopped this year. Costs continue to, we had hoped that costs would kind of stabilize, but costs have continued to go up. Some issues with supply chain, tariffs, things like that. And people are worried about their input costs plus their customer spending power, which obviously affects their margins, right? So about 39% cited economic conditions and rising costs as their top challenge headed into 2026 that they believe. Um, Only 15% said event access and costs, booth fees, limited spots are their biggest concern, that it's really more about how much a consumer can spend. Um, so looking at that kind of from a cost macro, where did you see that as we looked at the report, Sarah, that the creators are really feeling the most pressure?
Sure. Yeah. Outside of the macro, there were three main pain points that they flagged. First was rising event fees, and limited access to quality events, and that's where part of the reason why we're really pushing a diversified calendar this year. So, if fees are going up, obviously we can get more out of an event than just the direct sales, but you definitely need to factor in what makes sense for your business in terms of your tolerance for fees. And then also you want to balance it. You want to get enough events in so that one cancellation doesn't derail your whole year, but not so many that you're diluting your inventory or potentially overextending yourself on too many events. The second is time. I probably don't need to tell anyone on this call that creators are usually running a lot of things solo. You're wearing a lot of hats, and so time continues to be a huge challenge. There are only so many hours. And then the third is marketing, and this one is worth spending some time on for us because 57% of creators on our survey responded that it's their top education priority in 2026. That's a significant gap. And what's interesting is that some of the most effective marketing tactics for this industry are also the simplest. A lot of marketers would kind of say this is like bread and butter when it comes to marketing, which means that especially with tools and automation techniques that have made it easier and easier with AI, it like the opportunity is really there. So we already touched on email lists. Beyond that, showing up consistently on social media, tagging the events that you're attending, cross-promoting with the event organizers themselves. A lot of larger events have significant social followings, and they'll actively reshare your content if you're posting about being there. And that's free reach to an audience that's already interested in exactly what you're selling. One last thing on marketing is your pricing conversation, which Kyle already touched on this. It's part of your marketing. Your presence at the event is part of your marketing. It's definitely like old school foot traffic type marketing. But how you talk about your work at your booth, how you describe what makes it unique, how you state your price with confidence, that's all part of how customers perceive your value. And what I've actually, we're bringing up the previous webinar a lot. What I really liked about some of the advice that they gave in that was, especially for these large event planners, is you can ask them to critique your booth and your setup, and you can ask other maybe crafters or makers that have been in the industry for a while. Because your storefront at an event is also a chance for you to use those photos in other channels and social media, in your email, to really make the most out of what you get out of that event. So one of the biggest mistakes is kind of underselling yourself in the moment or even in your online presence. And the biggest thing that I would say for this type of marketing is to know your worth. Tap into channels that are easier and easier to tap into, and repurpose content where you are to alleviate some of the time burden there.
That is all phenomenal advice, and I keep bringing up that other one too. I actually wouldn't dug up the link here. Don't everyone jump to leave to go watch it, but we'll for those of you rewatching this, hopefully we'll have a link under it. But there was a previous webinar that covered a lot of this and just gave some really good real world advice. I think that's where we're getting a lot of it, and it all matched a lot that was in our report. But really, really great insights, Sarah, on kind of marketing, and it's such a unique space, right? It's there's such a personal connection, and I think that you hit it extremely well. So, to be honest, this is brought to you by ACT Insurance, so we do need to talk insurance, right? And I've done enough of these webinars to know, some people go, insurance is not that interesting, or like talk to me about it. But I've come to have this extreme appreciation for insurance. I'm now actually an insuree. I don't know if I told you that, but because I've learned all of these risks that come with running your own small business, and so. I'm going to lean a lot of you on this one, Sarah, because I'm not quite the insurance guru that you are. So I guess, we'll talk about some of the analysis and stuff, but I think could you just start us off just quickly with the overall kind of types of, oh, wait, I'm sorry, I am skipping ahead. No, we want to look at the insurance risk analysis first, and then we'll dive into the different types. So, anyway, from that, what did we find from the risks associated with this category in our report?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different risks that I know, like I can just feel everyone's eyes glaze over as soon as we talk about insurance. But insurance gets a lot more interesting as soon as something happens. So bear with me. Just very high level. Insurance can cover, and this is calling back to like an English class. There's first person and third person, right? So third person is someone else. So liability coverage typically covers other people, and then there's first person. So there's like if you caught like something, if damage has happened to you. So just at a very high level, I want to touch on that first. The insurance protects you from risks. So it's there to prevent your business from collapsing if something happens, whether it's to your own business property or to someone else's. And so one of the things we look at, particularly for the artists and craftsmen segment, is what are the big risks that these businesses face? What are the things that happen that causes losses to them, either to their own property or to other people? And the headline might actually surprise you. So last year we saw fewer claims than in 2024. The claim frequency actually went down by almost 30%, 29 or 28.7 to be precise. But the total claim costs went up by almost 50%. So that means there were fewer incidents, but the severity of those incidents were actually greater. And that could be, especially if you're a smaller business just getting started, just one loss, one accident could cause your business to be catastrophically impacted. So that's the key takeaway, that there were fewer losses, but they caused more damage per loss.
And I wanted to look at the report when we were kind of asking the questions. What we wanted to find from this was like, well, what were the causes of these, right? And we know that there's a variety. And so looking at what causes a claim and what could happen to really anyone, the number one by a significant margin was weather. So when we're talking weather, we're talking wind, storm-related incidences, things like that. That accounted for 46.1% of all claims. And weather can happen, we all know, anywhere, anytime. And so you don't think like, oh, insurance is for that long shot. No, weather happens, all the time and affected nearly half of it. So it connects how this industry operates. It's an outdoor, event-based industry, tents, canopies, merchandise exposed to the elements. Weather really can affect so much of your business. Tents and canopies actually specifically involved in more than 40% of all claims filed. So again, a major thing that can happen here. Wind was the primary culprit in most of those incidences, and the losses tended to be, you know, manageable on the per incident basis, but when they happen a lot, it can really add up. So again, 46% involved in weather. 40% of all claims include that tent and canopy damage, and 24% were an accident or property damage, 11% theft, and 7.4 vehicle. Um, I know that there was another one we wanted to touch on here. So what we said marginal costs on the tents, weather's the biggest number of events, but what really drove those rising like claims amounts, Sarah, from our analysis?
Yeah, it might actually be surprising, but it's fire losses, and those could be fire could cause damage to your own property, so you would want coverage for replacement for any of your property that's impacted by a fire. But for example, if you were found responsible for starting the fire, then you would potentially owe damages to the venue, or if it impacted other vendors, you could potentially owe damages to them as well. So that's why we talk a lot about, about protecting yourself. And then especially going into this year, I'm not sure if everyone's tracking, we're actually in a pretty nationally on average, there's a lot of regions that are in drought right now. So I actually think the fire trend is probably going to increase this year. So now more than ever, it's really important to think about some of these more severe risks like fire when kind of making your insurance decisions.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And I think it's pretty clear that this is a very events driven, most of the time outdoor. And so kind of summarizing major risk potentials, weather, fire. Again, there was some theft in there and things like that, but these are things that are really out of your control. And I think that that's what really struck me in the report is and analyzing the claims is like, okay, the images went up, claims went down, that's great. But at the same time, there's nothing that you can do really besides, scrape, raking for fire and things like that. But you're at somebody else's property, and so who knows what's going to happen. So it's just really important to understand that things are out of your control, and that's where insurance can come in. And it doesn't always happen at random. They do follow, kind of the calendar and crowds, which is one of our questions we'll get to here at the end. This is, you guys all work outside when it's beautiful. And so 55% of claims happen between May and August, peak event season. That makes sense. And then 25% of claims came from just two states, California and New York. Obviously, those are the densest in terms of population. But all of that said, I don't want to scare you guys into doing business. That's what insurance is here for. That's what ACT is here for. We just wanted to give you kind of the reality of what these claims might be. So before we dive into a little bit more about insurance, I kind of wanted to just give my summary of all, what does all this mean for 2026 as we kind of get into the heavy parts of the season. It's about to be beautiful across the country. Here's some concrete things that I wanted to share with you. We've already hit them really hard, but first, obviously build that diversified event calendar, not fewer events, smarter mix. Whatever you can do to kind of diversify against a rainout or a cancellation. But don't heavily rely on that one event you're going to make or break your business on. And then second is diversify, obviously, those channels like we've talked about. Even a modest online presence creates that buffer, that follow through, that secondary channel to connect with. Third, we already hit it, really hard, but we've got it across the board. Maintain the pricing discipline. Those 70% of consumers will pay more for that quality and originality. And invest in the marketing fundamentals. Show up consistently. Show up on social media. Show up to those events. Make sure that you've got that email list. Kind of be consistent across the board. And then, of course, from an insurance perspective, make sure, and we'll talk about that because I do want to talk about that. Make sure that your insurance reflects the size of your business, right? As your business changes, as your business grows, as should your insurance. And so, actually, let's dive into that a little bit further. Sarah, can you give me kind of the 101 or give our audience kind of the 101 on insurance? I mean, you mentioned a general liability, that third party, first party, all of that. What are kind of like some of the policies that a creative business should have from your perspective? And then we can kind of dive into, what they cover, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I'll try to keep this practical rather than like insurance jargon heavy, because I know that's not always the most exciting part of running a creative business, but it matters. Um, so a couple key coverages. The foundation for most creators is typically going to be general liability, and that's what protects you if your business or damages someone else or the venue. So if a customer gets injured at your booth, if something you do causes damage to a venue or another vendor's space, and honestly, a lot of events and venues require it just to get set up. So if you're doing shows regularly, you probably already know about this one. And then typically from there, you can add coverages onto the general liability. There's theft and damage coverage, also known as inland marine, and that has nothing to do with like sea and ocean faring. It's what protects your movable business property, such as inventory, equipment, and tools. And given that weather is the #1 cause of like non-liability based claims, we see this one is really important for outdoor sellers, especially. Cyber liability or data breach coverage. A lot of sellers and crafters are taking credit cards and processing personal information. And so it seems like an abstract thing, or it only happens to bigger businesses, but we're seeing more and more, especially with like AI enabled bad actors, that cyber liability or data breach coverage is more essential than ever, regardless of your business size. And then product liability covers you if a product you crafted or sold causes harm or damage after it leaves your hands. This one does typically have eligibility requirements based on the product itself. So be sure to disclose all types of products if you're updating your coverage or applying for new coverage.
Man, I got to jump in on that one because I've done enough of these webinars that I've learned so much about these different policies. And again, inland marine, you think it has something to do with that. It's really about theft and damage, which is like a really important one for your equipment and stuff like that. But the biggest one is cyber liability. Everybody thinks, well, I use Square. Oh, I use, Stripe. I'm protected. I have no, who's going to, how am I going to get a cyber claim? And then one of my best friends, it happened to, where he was blah, blah, blah. And in the terms and conditions, Square says, well, you were storing the data. Yes, it was in our NIST system. He could get fined, and he did have insurance to step in. But that the average cost was $250,000 for a cyber liability claim. So I ended up, because I do these webinars with you guys, I ended up adding one to mine, even though all I have is a Gmail and I don't even think I store credit cards. But to your point, that this is the #1 risk that's growing, and that I've learned in all spaces, and in this one, you just got to look at that add-on policy.
Yeah, for sure. Cyber liability is a huge one, and because especially with this industry, because people are processing via like plugins for their phones, a lot of things are processed wirelessly.
Mm.
You'd be surprised how frequently and how sophisticated some of these bad actors can get at intercepting that data. And it's really interesting. I'm probably almost going to the line of my area of expertise. I'm an insurance nerd, not a cyber risk nerd, but it's definitely growing, and we're definitely monitoring it closely. And then some other coverages that I didn't really get into, and it really depends on what you have going on in your business. But we have these coverages because a lot of small businesses in this space need them, are things like workers' comp. So if you're hiring anyone, even if it's part-time, your state probably requires you to carry that coverage. Another good one would be professional liability. If you're doing any like classes or workshops to supplement just your booth sales at events, we offer that as well. So depending on your unique business scenario and what you have going on, we add different coverage options if you need it.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because I always like to throw this in here. CVL from our team mentioned to me, he says, treat your insurance like your annual doctor's checkup, to where as your business changes, you just mentioned it. We did a whole session on if you start teaching classes, that's a different type of liability, right? Versus making products. And so you have to tell your insurance professional, just like you would your doctor, what changed this year? Well, my revenues changed. I hired somebody. I bought a car. I'm teaching classes. That's a completely different policy. So you teach every year we encourage, and it doesn't mean your costs are going to skyrocket to talk to your insurance professional about how your business changed, but it's more important, just like being honest with your doctor, be honest with your insurance professional and say, hey, here's what I'm doing. What are my risk portfolio? And then if you decide not to get the coverage, you don't get the coverage. But, I just thought that was such a great way to look at it, that I like to share it. And so I think one of the questions that we already had come through that I wanted to ask, we're talking about insurance, a very event-based business. Um, is this something that people typically carry year round, or is it just per event? Say I've got 3 events in 1 month, and that's all I really do. Should I carry that? I'm curious how are people doing it through ACT at least?
Yeah, I mean, our goal is to support business owners wherever they are in their journey with their business. So if you're just getting started and you're only planning like 1 or 2 events this season, we do have an event policy option. The coverages there are pretty bare bones, but they're going to typically satisfy your venue or event host liability requirements. And then for the most part, if you're doing more than a couple of events, we typically will recommend our annual policy or our pro policy because it covers things like product liability. It offers a lot of these add-on coverages that our event policy doesn't necessarily offer. And we're there when you're ready to convert to an annual if you're just starting off and you're like, hey, I just need coverage for this weekend event. It's a low cost, easy, affordable option. You can get covered the same day. If you know you're going to be doing a lot of events this season, it actually is more cost effective and provides better coverage to go with our pro option, which is an annual policy. And we offer flexible payment options, so you can pay up front. Or we do offer a monthly payment option to make it to help make it work for as many small businesses as possible.
Yeah, that was perfect. And we made it with our same audience numbers. Nobody got off after the insurance talk. So we appreciate you all. Again, this is, insurance is important. And I've learned that having doing this. So thank you for that rundown, Sarah. I think that's extremely important. And again, feel free to reach out individually to ACT or drop the questions here and we'll try to get to them. So we're getting close to the end. We've already taken up a decent amount of time. So I appreciate everybody sticking with us. I know we've kind of hammered them home through this, but Sarah, kind of run us through just a quick takeaway of what you think is the most important from this and from our report.
Sure. Okay. First is demand is strong. Consumers are still showing up, still spending. Many are buying more than before, so the market is there. Second, in-person events are still the core of this business for most creators, and that's not changing anytime soon. Consumers still love the experience of shopping in person, particularly for items within this space. Third, hybrid selling is growing. So online and in person are not an either or. The strongest businesses are building both within, what makes sense for their business and where you are in your journey. Fourth, excuse me, costs require smarter decisions. So you don't necessarily have to do more to earn more. You can definitely look at your pricing models, tap into existing audiences. And then fifth, risk is evolving, fewer incidents, but more expensive ones. So make sure your coverage reflects the actual scale and complexity of your business today. And then finally, protection enables growth. You can't build a sustainable creative business if one bad event can take you out. If insurance isn't just an expense, it's what lets you take smart risks and keep going.
I love that. I love the insurance push. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, and everyone who's joined us. This is an incredibly resilient and creative community, and we're honored to support it. We're going to be taking some Q&A, just a few in here. So if you guys have any other questions, please throw them in. We're happy to address them. But I did drop the link into our full Small Business Creative Outlook report from 2026, as well as our other ACT webinar, which is chock full of information about how to grow your business, things like that. And you can always visit, obviously, ACT Insurance online, reaching out to us directly. So with that, I'd love to jump into some questions here. So the first one that came up as so the first question was, are there parts of the US that artists have found to be good areas for in-person shows, and what time of year? So I excuse me. I actually dropped all of our data into AI to make sure I was right in my response. And it's kind of what you would expect. It's warmer, nicer weather leads the events where it's the best outcomes, right? And then the best timing is when those are. Now, if you look at the Arizona market, we found there was a spike, obviously, in November, December, January is a very nice time in Arizona, whereas and then most of our claims and policies happen in California and Florida throughout the year. Always nice, things like that. Surprising, I thought was interesting from the analysis is Illinois, Chicago specifically, is a major hub for these types of products. So that seems to be a good peak area for that. Texas was actually kind of the volume was up, but it was very, very volatile. That it wasn't consistent from what we found, what AI did the analysis of from our data was that it wasn't very consistent in that. And then other of the Midwest was a major area, but obviously during that summer sweet spot. So from what we analyzed of the best times and the best areas to do that from the data that we sourced, that's kind of the information we've got there. Let's do another question here. This one says, I've been completely avoiding doing an online business, but are you sure that many people said that it was a good idea? It's a really sweet question. Yes. So let me pull up my data here so I can be absolutely clear. And now remember, we said 75%, 75% of 100% of revenue, 50% said came from in-person events. So we totally understand the question. But looking at it here, we said 27.9% are relying heavily on online. And so, yes, it seems that online is an important part of this business. And I think if you watch the other webinar and hear from some of the operators, it's not about necessarily selling the product immediately, right? It's about that follow through. What do we call it? A follow-on channel, right? It's that, hey, I didn't buy it, but I followed them on Instagram. Oh, I saw it again. And I can tell you this from personal experience that I follow artists on Instagram and I go, fine, I finally, when I want it, when I've got the money, when the high intent comes, I move. So it's not necessarily about it being a full-time sales channel. It's about leveraging that follow-on channel to follow on, to get that eventual purchase, right? So yes. Looking at a few other questions here. So I think you probably answered this, Sarah, but I just want to confirm. Are the weather-related damages usually covered under my general liability policy? I don't know the answer to that one.
So the short answer to that is no. So the weather-related damages would typically fall under first-party coverage, which would be that inland marine, so protection for your movable business property. The general liability, again, when you think liability, think you are liable for someone else's damages. And obviously, unless you have superpowers and are controlling the weather and they can prove it, you're not going to be liable for weather damage to someone else's property.
See, this is why you're the wealth of knowledge on insurance. And since we're at it, I'll ask another one here. I'm selling both online and in person, as you mentioned. Does my coverage follow me on both channels?
So the ACT Pro policy would follow you on both channels. Our event policy really is just for that, for events. So that's the ACT Go. So if you are planning to sell on both channels, my recommendation would be to make sure that your current insurance provider covers you on both of those channels, or if you already have an ACT Pro policy, it is going to cover you on both of those channels.
Got it. I think you had mentioned that. Thank you, but that was a good one. Um, I'll be honest, I don't fully know the answer to this, but I could AI it, or maybe some people want to drop the answer in the chat here. But this person asks, what is the average in-person event fee everyone is paying? We did not ask that question. So I will have to get back to you on that. I'll take your email down. But that was a good one that I didn't have the answer to. Unless anyone wants to drop into the Q&A the answers to that, what's the average that they're paid per event? It probably varies um, per channel, but
It
um,
does. And I think it also depends. Like we cover people on the crafter side and then also on the artist side. So like the variation there, just to say that it varies a lot by kind of what end of the spectrum that you're in and the market that the event is taking place. So like that's it's a short answer for what is potentially like a very long answer. But Facebook groups and Reddit would be a great place to check on for that.
that's good. I have another, I'm going to paraphrase this one, another insurance one for you. If a fire happened, what kind of documentation, we'll call it, they ask pictures, but I mean, what kind of documentation would I need for something like this if this happens? Do you have any
Yeah,
idea of what that claim process looks like?
so typically when you're filing a claim, you're going to want a police report, potentially a report from the venue, definitely pictures. If you're looking to make a claim for your own property, receipts for anything, especially high value items. So documentation in terms of like the value of your inventory. So when it comes to insurance claims, the basically the more documentation, typically the better. And for sure, we have a claims department that if something does happen, you can absolutely call them and they will walk you through exactly what that claim will need in terms of documentation.
Gotcha. Perfect. Thank you. Any other questions? Drop them in there. I think we're done. Oh, wait, there's one more. Oh, missed that one. Um, does does my policy cover issues caused by my product after I sell it?
So product liability is where your product potentially causes damage after you sell it. That is something that is included with our annual ACT Pro policy. There are some product specific exclusions in terms of what kind of products are included on that. So depending on the scenario, that product may or may not have coverage. So it really depends on the specific product.
And you are a wealth of knowledge. Well, we appreciate it. I think that was all. Let me scroll. Yeah, that was all our questions. So we really appreciate you all joining us this afternoon. If you're rewatching this later after we did it live, thank you for watching. Go check out those links of our other webinars as well as review our ACT report. And we just really appreciate you guys joining. And yeah, have a great 2026. Let's take in this optimism. Thanks so much, Sarah.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye bye.